What kind of person are you, independent of your hobby? Independent of your hobby of photography, who are you exactly? Have you lost your motivation in photography? Do you feel stuck in your photography? You're not going anywhere? Well, in this video, I want to try and figure out with you why that might be the case and perhaps give you some pointers on how to fix it. There are 5 basic reasons. I've broken this down into 5 categories, and I'm going to put them in a pyramid. And the reason why I'm putting them in a pyramid is because they go from the most common to the least common. So the first reason is actually not really related to photography at all. It's actually more related to hobbies in general or pursuits in general. And it's that sometimes an interest can just pass. It can just go away. And it's not related to anything you're doing wrong. It's not related to anything that you're doing in your practice of photography. It's just dependent on the workings of the human mind. So I'll tell you a story. I used to be really interested in chemistry. And one day I just kind of found that my interest was waning. I found other pursuits. That's totally normal. It's totally normal to lose interest in a hobby for no reason. I think that kind of is a little unusual or surprising to some because in modern society, we're expected to specialize a lot. People who go to school, they're told, oh, you could become this, or you could become a doctor, or you could become a mathematician, or you could become a chemist. And that involves studying that topic for 10 years, getting your PhD, and then going on and then doing that for the next 30 years. Even if you get a job, maybe as something, working as like a programmer or something, you kind of almost are expected to do that for the rest of your life. And I think that is really unnatural. I think it's unnatural to do something for many years. And now some people like to do that and they can do that. And it happens for some hobbies, but it's not going to happen for everything. So if you picked up photography at one time and you really liked it, but now you kind of just don't feel as much passion for it, it could just be that you're losing interest in it, but you don't want to really admit it because it's kind of sad because, I think in modern technological society, we don't have a lot of meaning in our lives that's really connected to our basic survival. So we really go after pursuits and sort of artificial things that don't really mean anything in some grander scheme. And they kind of take the place of maybe what we should be doing for our survival. Anyway, all that is to say is that sometimes it can feel unnatural and sometimes you can feel sad that you're losing a hobby, but it's perfectly okay for that to happen. You can find something else to do. I think that's probably the most common reason why some people might feel that they're losing their passion for something, or they might even feel stuck. But with that out of the way, let's talk about things that are more related to photography. I think the next most common reason why you might feel stuck is technical. It could be something technical like exposure triangle or something to do with your camera. You just don't know how to use your camera properly yet, or you don't fully understand the effects of aperture or shutter speed. But it doesn't have to be about your camera or lenses or anything. It could just be fieldcraft. A lot of beginning wildlife photographers, for example, they go out in the middle of the day, they go out when the sun is high in the sky, and they kind of never get out of that mode. They kind of never get out of that habit. And then all of their pictures kind of suffer because the light is either too harsh or it doesn't look good or the light isn't interesting. And, well, of course you can take pictures, good pictures, even when the light is harsh. You can take good photos in pretty much any light. But it's a lot easier to take good wildlife photos when the sun is a little lower in the sky. And that's sort of a part of fieldcraft. That's technical too. Fieldcraft can also be going to the right spots. A lot of people start wildlife photography, because that's my genre I'm always talking about wildlife photography. A lot of people start wildlife photography and they go to these spots where it's hard to get close to animals. And so they're always cropping and their photos just don't look that good because they suffer technically. Or it could be post-processing. Maybe you're good with the composition, but your post-processing skills could use some improvement and you just never devoted the time to learn your post-processing software. Those are all easy to fix. You just have to figure out which area technically you could improve in and then improve that. Maybe you could be taking a course. Maybe it could be reading a book or something, or watching some videos on the internet, reading some articles, something like that. But what if you're really good technically, you understand your camera perfectly, you're really good with fieldcraft, and, well, you're still feeling stuck? It could be psychological. Psychological reasons are things like maybe you're hard on yourself about your photography. You think all your photos suck, and they don't really suck, but you think they suck. And you constantly put yourself down. In that case, you could just be suffering because that's not a very good feeling when you do photography. Or maybe you're afraid to show your photography to the world. Maybe you like your photography, but you're worried about criticism from others. And those are all valid things, and that's pretty common too. It's not as common as the technical. I think the technical is more common than the psychological, but the psychological is common too. And if you have one of these sort of psychological blocks in your mind, then it's really worth working through that before you continually sort of damage your psyche by forcing yourself to do photography, even though you have this psychological block. You're working against yourself and you don't want to do that. Now, of course, it's beyond the scope of this video to talk about how to resolve those psychological blocks, but if you can identify that you have one of those, it's a really good idea to work on that. But what if you're good technically, you don't have any psychological blocks, you think all your photos are awesome, and maybe they are awesome, but you're still feeling stuck? Well, the next reason, and I think this is actually a more and more common reason these days, it's the social reason. What do I mean by social? Well, human beings are social creatures, and I think one of the ways that kind of sustains any interest, any hobby, is sharing it with other people. I don't even like to admit that myself because I'm a hermit Luddite and I don't like to be around other people, but it's true. I think pretty much everyone has to share their photography with at least somebody else. And in my opinion, and it's paradoxical to say this, but in my opinion, it's hard to do that these days because sharing on the internet, on social media, on all this high-tech stuff is actually very unnatural and very superficial because it's powered by algorithms that encourage us not to make connections. So maybe you're a very good photographer, maybe you know everything about your camera, and maybe you're sharing your photos online on Instagram or whatever, and you don't feel fulfilled by it, and you're starting to feel stuck with your photography because you're starting to focus more on getting an audience. You're starting to focus more on getting likes on social media rather than art for the sake of the art. And I think that's something that can really cause you also to be stuck in photography because personally, I think sharing photos on the internet is essentially meaningless. I don't do it much myself except for professional reasons because I don't really think sharing on the internet is very meaningful because you don't really make serious connections with too many people sharing your photography that way. That doesn't mean it doesn't have any value, but I think it's very easy to get sucked into a sort of environment where you're just sharing for an anonymous audience, and that's not very meaningful in my opinion. Again, that's not to say that the internet is useless, that you can't find meaningful connections using it, but more often than not, the environment that it encourages is not very healthy. Okay, but what happens if you share your photography in your photo club? You have a lot of good friends that like to see your photography. Actually, your social sharing sphere is healthy. You don't have any psychological blocks. You're good technically. You know everything about your camera. You're not losing your passion. You feel passionate about photography, but you still feel stuck. And this kind of brings me to the last and most sort of complex reason why you might be feeling stuck in your photography. And everything else I mentioned could be going right. But if you still feel stuck, I think the reason is very likely to be a kind of spiritual reason in a sense. And by spiritual, I'm not meaning religious. I'm not a religious person myself. I don't believe in any gods, but it could be a spiritual reason in the following sense. Well, as human beings, we kind of have a need to develop our identity. And developing an identity, developing a sense of self is a complex phenomenon. Well, one of the key aspects of doing so, at least, it's not the only aspect, but one of the key aspects of it does involve going back to the beginning of your creative center. And that's sort of like a base of operations within yourself where you You use your mind, the mind of a beginner, to explore the world around you. And the sort of central theme behind going back to your creative center, it's not a topical thing. It's atopical. It doesn't involve a specific hobby. It doesn't involve a specific pursuit. It's the state in which you kind of explore the world based on initial interest in things. It's not based on highly developing any one specific hobby. And this creative center is sort of like having a beginner's mind. It's like you're a child and you go out into the world and you explore the world just based on what looks nice to you, and you kind of develop your own identity based on your exploration of those different things. And as human beings, we have the need to go out and explore different things without past knowledge holding us down. And if you're really accomplished in something, there is always the danger that that one thing can take over your identity. That one thing can kind of overtake that creative center, and you kind of lose that initial feeling of exploring from first principles. So ask yourself the following question. Who are you? What kind of person are you? Independent of your hobby, independent of your hobby of photography, who are you exactly? And I think if you have trouble answering this question, if you constantly think of yourself as a photographer, then that can kind of indicate that you have let photography overtake your fundamental creative center. The remedy to this is not to quit photography, but to give yourself time to explore the world outside of photography. That doesn't just mean develop hobbies in other areas. It doesn't just mean take up a new hobby. It means take a little bit of a break from photography and allow yourself to feel okay letting it go. That doesn't mean letting it go, but it means allow your inner being to just detach from photography. Attachment, that's a key word. If you're too attached to something, it means you can't be fully developed in that thing. If you're too attached, it means you can't reawaken your creative center because your creative center is suppressed by that attachment. So you kind of have to detach a little bit from photography. You have to detach from that obsession of getting better, detach from that and go back and try and explore the world a little bit away from photography. If you start to identify as a photographer, you're always doing photography, you're steeped in it, chances are at some point you're going to get to this stage where your attachment to photography is actually hindering your natural creativity in the world. And this happens, I think, to a lot of creative professionals, a lot of creative people who just do their art a lot. They start to lose sight of that starting point that got them interested in photography in the first place, or interested in whatever they're doing. So my advice to you is, if you're in this stage, if you've identified that you're kind of too attached to photography, if you're identifying yourself always as a photographer and you cease to identify yourself as a human being, you have to take that time to kind of psychologically or even spiritually in your soul detach from photography and feel again what it's like to be that person who doesn't know anything and is just exploring the world for the first time. So I think I've covered most of the reasons why you might be feeling stuck in photography. It's not an easy topic and it's not an easy thing to figure out about yourself, but I hope this video at least help you elucidate the reasons why you might be stuck and figure out a sort of roadmap to get to a place where you can enjoy photography again. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again next time.